If looks could kill, then you'd do better than a shotgun shell. By PlayRough. Summary. Chuya coughs, and there's something else in his tone that Dazai can't make out. Something other than annoyed at Dazai. Did you get hit in the fight, idiot? No, Dazai guesses. But really, he doesn't know. What fight? Dazai doesn't remember a fight. And the last time they had a mission, Dazai wasn't hurt. Chuya's making a mistake. Dazai can maybe hear soft murmurs that sound a little like, what the fuck? But he can't be bothered with whatever Chuya's problem is right now. He's tired, and his head hurts bad enough that he might actually consider taking painkillers if he were allowed to have them. Or Dazai gets his shit rocked. Literally. When Dazai wakes up, all he can think about is that it's too bright. Actually, waking up almost seems like too nice of a term. Dazai is slammed back into awareness, too fast and before he's ready. He just wants to go back to sleep, but a sudden throbbing pain surges through his skull. It takes all of 2 seconds to realize Dazai must have woken up because he's having a migraine. There isn't any other way his head could hurt this badly. So much for going back to sleep. Still, Dazai would prefer to spend this miserable day laying down and wishing for death. Dazai! Dazai is barely able to peel his eyes open before the light filtering in between his eyelashes burn. He has to recoil back, shoving his face into Mori's coat, crumpled beneath him. The coat was drafty and let in light, but it shouldn't be this bright. Or maybe he left the light on. Even though it hurts, he can't be bothered to get up to turn it off. Dazai has plenty of experiences with migraines to know getting up is only going to make him feel worse. Besides, it's not so bad if he just lays down in bed with his eyes shut. It hurts, but it's only slightly stabbing pressure through his brain. Dazai will just remain horizontal until this passes, and anything he misses in the meantime is a problem for tomorrow. Dazai, get up! Chuya makes the worst alarm clock ever. What's the matter with you? Chuya pesters. Did you get hit? Hit by what? Dazai has no idea what Chuya is talking about, or why he's in Dazai's container. Dazai didn't even hear him come in. It's nearly impossible to miss the sound of the metal doors scraping open. He would be thankful that it's only Chuya, but Dazai deserves to be taken out by an enemy for being so lazy. How pathetic. All this training and he's rendered helpless by a headache? Did you hit me? Dazai whines, trying to use his arms to cover his eyes and block the light out better. It certainly feels like Chuya hit him. It feels like he got run over by a truck. Talking is weird, like he's still half asleep. His tongue feels too big for his mouth. What? No. Chuya coughs, and there's something else in his tone that Dazai can't make out. Something other than annoyed at Dazai. Did you get hit in the fight, idiot? No, Dazai guesses. But really, he doesn't know. What fight? Dazai doesn't remember a fight. And the last time they had a mission, Dazai wasn't hurt. Chuya's making a mistake. Dazai can maybe hear soft murmurs that sound a little like, what the fuck? But he can't be bothered with whatever Chuya's problem is right now. He's tired, and his head hurts bad enough that he might actually consider taking painkillers if he were allowed to have them. I'm not carrying you back, you lazy piece of shit. Chuya grumbles, and he grabs the edge of Mori's coat, tugging it away from Dazai's face. Sunshine hurts, and Dazai groans, squinting and trying to turn away. There's nowhere to go though, and he has no choice but to slowly let his eyes adjust. Eventually, Dazai is able to open his eyes without the light searing him, and the sharp stabbing pain eases into a piercing headache. The first thing he realizes is, he's not at home. Chuya isn't bothering him in his container. Dazai is lying on the ground. Not even somewhat comfortable ground like grass. He's lying on dirt, rocks, and sticks. Using his peripheral vision makes him dizzy, but he can maybe see trees. Dazai makes the risky decision to lift his head and attempt to sit up. Usually when he's dizzy, sitting up is not the way to go, but he didn't like not knowing where he was. Dazai, can you hear me? Chuya pesters, and he can hear, but it's taking all of Dazai's efforts to focus. Whatever the hell Chuya wants from him is the least of his worries right now. In a perfect world, Dazai would have loved to take his time sitting up. But this world isn't perfect, and if it were, there's no place for someone like Dazai. So instead of taking a second to make sure Vertigo isn't going to instantly knock him back down, Dazai suddenly finds himself reacting on instinct and scrambling to sit up, barely missing his sleeve as he suddenly loses everything in his stomach. Motherfucker! Chuya swears. That's right, Dazai forgot Chuya was here. And he sounds mad. Despite this, Dazai feels Chuya's hand touch his shoulder. He's not sure if it's the sudden vomiting, the migraine, or the fact that Dazai is just skittish by nature, but he flinches back so hard that it makes his head spin. It feels like his skull has been cracked open and something is squeezing his brain as hard as they can. Dazai, just relax. Chuya's voice sounds a lot softer than before, but still oddly controlled. It's like he's trying to keep himself from shouting at Dazai. Not that he wouldn't deserve it. I'm going to touch you again, okay? Dazai nods, and that was a mistake. The littlest tip of the head makes it feel like he's spun all the way around the world. He squeezes his eyes shut and gags again, digging his fingers in the dirt to try and steady himself. Whoa! Chuya yelps, and Dazai feels hands touch him again. He knows it's coming. He's consented to being touched, but he still jumps out of his skin. The hands don't leave this time though. They start rubbing circles across Dazai's back as he continues to gag. Take it easy, Mackerel. It's just me. Dazai knows it's Chuya, but that doesn't make anything easier. Dazai is just difficult all on his own like that. Eventually, Dazai's stomach stops flip-flopping, and even though he's still dizzy, he's upright, which a few minutes ago seemed like an impossible task. Okay, Dazai, I'm just gonna ask you some questions, okay? Chuya's hands haven't stopped rubbing his back. Dazai nods again, and he really needs to stop doing that. His head is swimming, and moving makes it feel like he's being held underwater. Dazai whines as Chuya's hands go from rubbing his back to pulling him in the opposite direction of the ocean's currents as he positions Dazai to lean his weight on him. Don't pass out, Dazai. Chuya's voice echoes. Stupid chibi, that doesn't really seem to be up to Dazai. You're okay, don't freak out. Dazai's not freaking out, and he's embarrassed that Chuya would suggest that. He's as calm and in control as he always is. Or maybe he's not. One of Chuya's gloved hands is suddenly wiping a tear off his cheek, and Dazai realizes he's crying. He wants to feel embarrassed about that too. This whole thing is mortifying, but at least when he's leaning against Chuya, he doesn't have to hold his head up. Makes the spitting a little better. The gloved hand doesn't go away when the tears are gone. The cool leather begins brushing across his forehead, gently fussing with his bangs. I'm gonna ask the questions now, okay? Chuya mumbles softly. Dazai goes to nod again, but he can't. The gloved hand holds him tight to something else, and after a second, Dazai realizes he's got his head tucked against Chuya's shoulder. Don't do that, Mackerel. Just answer if you can, okay? Dazai tries to nod again, but the hands haven't let go. Chuya keeps him pressed tight to his chest, not allowing Dazai's brain to slip down between the cracks. Dazai, don't move your head. Chuya's voice is huffy, like he's frustrated that Dazai can't follow simple instructions. Okay, Dazai swallows. His voice feels thick, shaky. It doesn't sound like it belongs to him, but it works. The hands holding his head readjust, and following their movements makes Dazai dizzy again. So he just lets himself be maneuvered, and then one of Chuya's hands is suddenly holding Dazai's, fingers laced together. It's strangely grounding. Nothing up until this point has really felt real, and if this all turns out to be a dream, Dazai wouldn't have really been surprised. The hand intertwined with his feels real though, or at least realer than anything else. Do you know where we are? Chuya asks. Dazai peels his eyes open. He can't remember when he closed them, and tries to look at his surroundings again. There's dirt, grass, trees. The horizon line tilts and sways, and the vertigo instantly has his stomach unsteady again. Trees. Dazai whines out as he screws his eyes shut, turning his face back further into Chuya's chest. That's not a location, Dazai. Chuya sighs. Dazai doesn't have to come up with anything else, thankfully, because Chuya's asking his next question. What were we doing before you got knocked out? Dazai got knocked out? Well, it makes sense. He's obviously not in his container, and Dazai wouldn't fall asleep on the ground out in the open. If he's not in his container, then Dazai doesn't know where he is, and as hard as he tries, Dazai can't remember what he was doing before this. He's guessing they were on a mission. There isn't really any other reason he can think of for them to be out here. Mission? Dazai mumbles, voice sounding like he's asking Chuya a question instead of answering. Are you guessing? He is, but Dazai doesn't feel like that's something he should admit to Chuya. No. Dazai's voice cracks at the end, and he suddenly feels like he has to blink back tears again. Chuya, I'm fine. Just humor me, okay? Chuya huffs firmly. He definitely sounds mad. What was the mission? Dazai is pretty sure he should know that. That's like his whole job. Oh shit, they're still on the mission. The mission that Dazai doesn't remember anything about. Fuck. The boss already isn't thrilled when Dazai gets hurt, but he's going to be beyond pissed if Dazai isn't able to complete the mission because he fucking forgot. Dazai swallows the saliva quickly pooling in his mouth. There have been other times that Dazai has gotten sick or hurt on a mission. Had to sit out and let Chuya finish the rest of his plan. But that isn't an option if he doesn't remember the plan. Dazai? Chuya sounds muffled, hard to hear over the ringing in his ears. Can he fake it? Make something up on the fly? Maybe. Maybe if Dazai just had a case of mild amnesia, but the dizziness and the migraine were really throwing a wrench into things. When did it get so hot? Dazai, I'm fine. Dazai interrupts, breath hitching. He suddenly realizes he's not getting in any air. Dazai tries again, lungs stuttering and catching on the inhale. I'm fine. The mission. We were... Dazai, slow down a second, Chuya urges. Take a deep breath. Dazai can feel Chuya's chest rising and falling as he leans against him, and he can't imagine matching that stride. Breathing is the most difficult thing in the world, and fuck Chuya for making it look easy. Dazai, you're okay. Chuya's hand starts rubbing up and down Dazai's back again, and he squeezes their hands together in a rhythm. That's just about the only thing Dazai registers as his chest flutters, huffing and puffing quietly. Just keep breathing, everything's gonna be okay. Dazai whines, or at least he tries to. That stutters too, and it sounds more like he's sobbing, and he can feel tears pooling up in his eyes, and then spilling all over his cheeks as he blinks. Oh, Dazai's just crying again. Somewhere in the back of his mind he realizes he's being really pathetic, and he should be ashamed of himself. Shh, mackerel, it's okay. Chuya mumbles as he struggles to catch his breath, even more mortifying. I've got you, it's gonna be okay. His headache is throbbing, and Dazai can feel static crisp around the edges of his brain. He needs to get it together. Dazai needs to get up and do the mission. Dazai needs to breathe. Everything feels fuzzy and slow. It feels like he's underwater. Did he drown himself? Is that why he can't breathe? Dazai, just follow my breathing. Chuya's voice is loud and commanding, and Dazai flinches even though it makes the dizziness so much worse. He keeps forgetting Chuya's mad at him. His partner knows he's nothing but dead weight on this mission. There's no point in hiding it. Chuya's going to report to Mori that he was completely useless, and then Dazai is going to have to deal with the consequences of that. Suddenly, Dazai's hand is brought up and pressed flat against Chuya's chest. You're okay, Dazai. The mission is over. We just have to get back to the car. Chuya's other hand keeps rubbing up and down his back. Breathe in with me, okay? Okay. Dazai whines out the closest thing to an okay he can manage. Chuya breathes in, and it's a lot easier to follow with Dazai's hand on his partner's chest. Chuya's hands are just as grounding and feel just as real as they did before. It helps cut through the fog. Dazai inhales in, and his chest still catches and stutters, but it's marginally better than it was before. Chuya has to walk him through breathing, the most basic of human instincts, for an embarrassing amount of time. Eventually, Dazai is able to take a few solid breaths, and it feels less like he's been violently shaken around. There we go, Dazai. Chuya's hand rests on the top of Dazai's head. It's okay, you've got this, you're doing great. Dazai doesn't feel like he's doing great. Haven't really done anything. Dazai grumbles and his voice sounds raw. Chuya laughs gently, and that at least makes Dazai feel the tiniest bit better. You didn't pass out, which is awesome. Chuya's fingers run through Dazai's hair, gently pushing through sweat and tangles. Chibi's gentle, making sure the cool leather doesn't tug or pull on his bangs. Okay, I had more questions, but don't worry about it. I'm pretty sure you have a concussion. Dazai wants to scoff, but moving hurts. He feels less faint, but his skull is still squeezing the life out of his brain. Don't have a concussion. Dazai states with a lot of confidence for someone who both threw up and almost fainted in the past 10 minutes. Shut the fuck up. Chuya's words are harsh, but they don't really hold any of his usual spitfire. He's been nicer than before, handling Dazai like he's some pathetic shock victim. I didn't see you get hit, but you were unconscious, and you're displaying concussion symptoms. No, I'm not. This is a bad lie. Dazai knows memory loss and vomiting are concussion symptoms, and he's also neglected to tell Chuya about the dizziness. Dazai sticks to his guns though. No concussion here. Fine. Chuya huffs. Will it make you happy if I finish the stupid concussion test? No. Dazai whines. Wrong answer. Chuya grumbles. I'm trying to give you some slack here because I know mood swings are a concussion symptom. But come on, Dazai. Not having mood swings. Dazai sniffles. The hand that was laying over Chuya's chest grips onto his partner's shirt. Then prove it to me and answer my questions. Chuya replies smugly. He sounds like a stupid troll guarding a bridge. Fine, I'll answer your riddles, Chibi. Dazai huffs, at the very least not wanting to make things any more difficult than he already has. Repeat the days of the week backwards, starting with today. Dazai has to think for a second what day it is. He's pretty sure it's Thursday. Or Tuesday. Wednesday? Meeting in the middle seems like a good guess, but Dazai must have already fucked up, because Chuya frowns at him. Thursday, Friday, Saturday... Okay, stop. Chuya huffs. First of all, it's Saturday. Second, I said backwards, mackerel. You have a concussion. Dazai doesn't want to have a concussion. No, Chuya, that's not fair. Do another. Dazai pleads. Okay, relax. Chuya sounds exasperated now, and Dazai feels like he can't stop fucking up. He's not trying to be difficult, but he can't have a concussion. What's 258 backwards? Dazai really tries to concentrate, but it makes his head spin again. What did Chuya say again? 528? So backwards that would be 5. Dazai sees Chuya raise an eyebrow. I mean 2. 2 a... Dazai blinks, and the corner of his vision seems fuzzy again. He feels floaty and detached again, and then Chuya is suddenly patting Dazai's cheek. Whoa, hey, stay with me, mackerel. Dazai focuses on Chuya's voice. He takes a deep breath, grateful that he's successful and doesn't seem to be having another panic attack, just getting woozy like a stupid damsel. He focuses on the sound, tone, and cadence of Chuya's voice. After a few seconds listening to Chuya telling him to just breathe, and that everything's okay, and feeling the gloved thumb brush across his cheek, Dazai once again feels a little more present in his own body. You with me, mackerel? Chuya hums. Dazai slurs back. Whoa, he just realized he's really tired. With you. I'd shine a light in your eyes to see if your pupils reacted differently, but your stupid eye patch makes that impossible. So that's all I've got. Congratulations, mackerel, you have a concussion. Sorry. Dazai sniffles, and he doesn't understand why he's being such a crybaby about it. Hey, you're okay. Chuya reassures him. I promise, mackerel, we're gonna get home and you're just gonna take it easy for a couple weeks. Sorry, don't know why I'm crying. Dazai mumbles into Chuya's chest, trying to ignore the wet spots he feels on his partner's jacket. It's okay, don't apologize. It's weird to hear from you. Chuya jokes, and the tone of confidence combined with his hands rubbing circles against Dazai's back. It does make him feel the tiniest bit better. Being over-emotional is a concussion symptom. Don't worry about it, you're fine. Dazai doesn't feel like it's fine, but he can't worry about that right now. Chuya's wrapping his arms around Dazai's waist. Ready to stand up? Chuya asks. No, I'm tired, Chibi. Dazai is so dizzy just sitting here on the floor, he can't imagine a fate as horrible as standing up. I know, but we just have to walk to the car. Chuya encourages. It's not far, and then we can go home and relax. I don't want to walk. Dazai complains. I can't carry you all the way there. Chuya's lying. He easily could. Dazai's not that heavy. What if you fall asleep? I'm not allowed to sleep? Dazai sniffles, suddenly blinking tears out of his eyes again. His headache is still excruciating. He wants nothing more than to lay down. Mori's textbook says rest after a concussion. Am I in trouble? What? No, you're not in trouble. Chuya's arm tightens around Dazai's waist. You got hit on the head. If you go to sleep right now, you might not wake up. I want that. Dazai slurs, ignoring the fact that Chuya's totally wrong about not being able to sleep after concussion. He'll have to tease Chibi about that later. No, Dazai, come on, you idiot. Chuya moves Dazai's limbs around, and he just lets it happen. Come on, up we go, mackerel. Dazai is suddenly hauled upright by Chuya before he can protest. The earth tilts, and Dazai wobbles to the side, unable to stop the pathetic whine as he sways. The awful floaty feeling is back, and Dazai's hands grip tightly onto Chuya's shirt. I've got you, it's okay. Chuya mumbles, and if it weren't for his steady voice and hands keeping Dazai upright, he probably would have actually fainted this time. After an excruciating amount of time, the centrifuge turning his brain to mush eases up. Dazai is able to hold a little bit of his own weight, but it still feels like his legs are made of jelly. Better? Chuya asks. Much better. Dazai lies. Now that he's standing up and only somewhat dizzy, he's got to prepare to walk himself wherever the car is. Or stumble. Chuya's hands don't let go of him though. I'm fine, Chuya. Dazai insists, bracing himself to push away from the slug and stop being so pathetic. Good. Before he has a chance to stand on his own, Chuya slings one of Dazai's arms around his shoulder. He really was prepared to walk there by himself, but Dazai can't help himself from leaning all of his weight on Chibi. Dazai's head rests to the side on his own shoulder. His skull still feels like a magic 8-ball, nothing but sparkly liquid sloshing around up there. Am I crushing you? Dazai asks after a second, a little ashamed of having to use Chuya's help to stand. He didn't need help. Don't want to smush Chibi. Just walk, Dazai. Chuya ignores the teasing and tightens his arm around Dazai's waist. I won't let you fall. Chuya's voice sounds so much more reassuring than it should. Slug's voice is supposed to be annoying. But right now, Chuya's voice pushes him to put one foot in front of the other and wobble forward. There we go, Chuya mumbles as they shuffle onward. It's just a 15-minute walk to the pickup spot. Let me know if you feel like you're gonna faint again. Dazai doesn't say anything. The ground is rippling and rolling underneath him. It's frighteningly disorienting. He's not sure how long they walk for. Every once in a while, Dazai's foot trips over a rock or a stick or nothing at all, and he stumbles a little. The vertigo gets worse during these moments, and each time he's so sure that he's going to feel himself hit the ground. Chuya is true to his word though, and every time Dazai trips or stumbles, Chibi doesn't let him fall. One hand tightens reassuringly around his waist, and another gently lays across his chest, keeping Dazai from tipping too far forward. Still doing okay, Dazai? Chuya nudges his shoulder gently. Dazai makes a sound somewhere between a groan and a whine. But it's so wheezy and quiet, Chuya might not have heard him at all. Dazai, do me a favor and talk to me so I know you're not about to faint. Normally, Dazai would have been ecstatic to have an open invitation to yak and annoy Chuya, but walking while the world is slipping and sliding out from under him is already hard. Forming words while doing that is going to make his head start spinning again. Do I have to? Dazai whines. Yes, Chuya grumbles. Dazai sighs dramatically. Come on, so I know you're not dying. Chuya insists. Chibi's worried about me. Dazai purposefully leans a bit more weight on Chuya while teasing him. Maybe he's also a little worn out. Chuya doesn't comment on it. He just keeps Dazai steady. Of course I am, asshole. Everyone should be worried when you're around. You're a menace. Talk. It's quiet, other than the scraping of shoes against the dirt for a few seconds while Dazai thinks. But thinking still makes the headache worse. He decides to keep it simple and get something that's been bothering him out of the way. You said I'm not in trouble. Dazai mumbles, trying his best to keep the waver out of his tone. Yeah, you're not. Chuya confirms, but he sounds unsure. But I have a concussion. Dazai's confused, and the puzzle pieces aren't quite fitting together. Yes, you have a concussion. Chuya tightens his arm around Dazai's waist again. We went over that. But I'm not in trouble? Dazai asks again, head rolling to the side. It feels too heavy for him to hold up, and the walking has only slowly increased the pain of the headache. No, Dazai, you're not in trouble. Chuya confirms again, but his voice sounds unhappy again. You have a concussion, and you're not in trouble. What's not clicking? Chuya sounds really frustrated now. Is Slug being dense on purpose? Is Dazai missing something glaringly obvious? Maybe that blow to the head really messed up something. But I got hurt on the mission, right? Boss is gonna be mad. Dazai slurs, blinking heavily. Dazai realizes he's shaking, and because he's pressed up against him, Chuya must notice it too. The arms that are holding him up tighten again, and Chibi stops walking. Dazai doesn't stop though, the momentum tips him forward unsteadily. Whoa, careful there, Mackerel. Chuya's arms are the only thing keeping him from falling down into oblivion. The edges of Dazai's vision fuzz, and his partner's voice sounds far away. He's familiar enough with vertigo to know that he should probably sit down soon. Chuy. Dazai tries to tug on a bit of Chuya's jacket, anything to ground himself a bit, but everything slips out of his fingertips as his vision darkens. I don't feel good. When Dazai opens his eyes a few seconds later, he's still leaning against Chuya. They're on the ground, and Chuya is probably never going to let him hear the end of having to kneel in dirt in his nice clothes. How are you doing? Back with me, Mackerel? Dazai swallows. His throat feels dry. It's really hot, Chu. The familiar rustling of leather and then blissfully cool hands brush across Dazai's forehead. Chuya must have taken one of his gloves off. You feel a little warm, Mackerel. Chuya brushes his hands through Dazai's hair. I think you've got a low-grade fever. Not sick. I know, Chuya hums. I think you're just stressed and probably overeating. Dazai can't deny either of those. He does feel stressed and uncomfortably warm. He's too tired to fight any other accusations either. Do you want to take your jacket off? Chuya suggests. Dazai remembers not to nod, and so his pathetic whine will have to do for a yes. He tries to shrug off Mori's coat, but his limbs won't cooperate. Slow down, Mackerel. Chuya's hands steady him, and then pull the heavy leather coat off his shoulders. Let me help you. Dazai wants to say he doesn't need help, but by the time he works around the syllables, Chuya already has his jacket unbuttoned. He decides to at least not be in the way as Slug manipulates his limbs to undress him. Jackets aside, Chuya also loosens Dazai's tie before taking that off too and draping the bundle over his arm. Better? Chuya asks. Much better. Dazai sighs, eyes fluttering shut. He's not lying this time. The bit of cool breeze feels amazing. Good. Don't throw up on me. Chuya hums, and before Dazai can wonder why Chibi would say that, the world violently tilts again. Dazai moans pathetically, feeling nauseous and dizzy. Chuya jostles him around, mumbling sorry softly. Thankfully, it only lasts a second before he's righted and settled in Chuya's arms in a bridal carry. I said don't throw up on me. Chuya's expression is soft despite the words, and then he smiles down at Dazai as he settles his head on the older's shoulder. I didn't make that promise. Dazai huffs, but he returns Chibi's soft smile. He's not as dizzy like this anyways, though Chuya said he wasn't gonna carry me. That was before you fainted, Mackerel. Chuya teases. Can't have you whacking your head again on the floor. You've lost enough brain cells for today. Dazai is going to complain, or at least insult Chuya back, but the world starts swaying again when his partner begins walking. He has to tuck his forehead into Chuya's shoulder to keep steady. It's almost nice, other than the headache, until Dazai remembers they're on their way to see Mori, and a small whimper escapes him. He can't help it. He doesn't want to be in trouble. The headache is bad enough. Dazai, sweetheart, you're not in trouble. Chuya mumbles into the top of Dazai's head. Did Dazai say something out loud? We're not reporting back to the boss today anyways. He doesn't have to know. But I'm concussed. Yeah, and I know how to monitor concussions. We're just gonna go to my house and rest. That's okay, Mackerel? Oh, yeah, Dazai wants to go to Chuya's house. Chuya's house has heating and blankets and movies and, well, Chuya. It's okay. Dazai mumbles tiredly. Dazai feels like he's floating again. It's not frightening and detaching though, like when he was about to faint. Dazai knows Chuya's gonna keep him tethered down. Everything's hazy, and Dazai feels himself get lost. He's sleepy and comfortable, and only remembers a few flashes. Chuya gently sets him down on his feet and keeps an arm firmly around Dazai's waist while he opens the car door. He's gently pushed inside, guiding him to sit and then lean his head back on Chibi's shoulder. Dazai hears the click of a seatbelt and then feels leather gloves petting through his bangs again. In a blink of an eye, he's being gently pulled out of the cab, and Dazai flinches away at first, but he recognizes Chuya's voice as it hushes him softly. He settles down, allowing himself to be maneuvered again. It feels like he's out again before Chuya finishes picking him back up. They're in the apartment when Dazai comes into awareness again. Chuya's moving him around again, shoving his arms into something warm. He's pushed down into something soft, the couch probably. And before Dazai can try to communicate that he's not tired, Chuya's tucking a blanket around his shoulders. Chuya. Dazai complains sleepily about everything and nothing in particular. Shh, I know, just rest for now. Chuya hums, brushing his bangs back. I'll wake you up in a bit for some water and painkillers, and that should help the fever too. Can we watch a movie? Dazai's voice is quieter than a mouse. The headache is making him feel restless, so it's gonna be a miracle if he falls asleep. Sorry, sweetheart, Chibi murmurs. TV's not good for concussions. Dazai gives a half shrug of one shoulder. It's just a little quiet, Dazai mumbles, turning his head into the arm of the couch a bit more. Doesn't matter. Hang on a second, Chuya whispers, and then the hand stops petting him. Dazai wants to watch Chuya walk away, but he doesn't dare move his head once his partner leaves his peripheral vision. After a moment, soft piano music begins to slowly fill the apartment. Chuya's hands come back, petting gently through his hair again, fingertips scratching gently at Dazai's scalp. Better? Chuya hums as he brushes Dazai's bangs aside. Much better. Dazai exhales, feeling himself slowly melt into the couch. The touch is a nice distraction from the headache, and the soft music slowly lulls Dazai to sleep. Concussion fics are seriously so underrated, and I love this one for delving into how awful a head-to-the-head can truly feel. Chuya is also so gentle in this fic, which has me all fuzzy inside. I love them so much. Thank you so much, PlayRough, for giving me permission to podfic this. It's coming later than intended, I know, but that's because I was kinda intimidated by the word count. In the end, I found myself having too much fun reading this to care. Oh my god, I spent so much time just looking for good images for the thumbnail. Nothing canon fit at all, and I just realized that there's rarely any Hurt Dazai fan art. Like, it's so crazy. I scoured Google, Pinterest, Tumblr, and I hardly found fan arts that had active artists I can ask permission from. In the end, I settled for this, which I don't know if it truly fits the fix vibe, but alas. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Till next time.